who wrote Arrows, a systems-based approach to school leadership. And it's the book that every school leader needs to be reading. So I'd like to first start by just introducing the authors and letting them tell you a little bit about themselves and how the experience of writing Arrows has impacted their current situation. So Carrie, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thank you, Star, and hello, everyone. So my name is Carrie Rosebrock, and I'm currently a professional learning specialist with the CIESC, which is the Central Indiana Education Service Center. And in that role, over the past 18 months, our world, as it is dedicated to professional learning, has completely changed. And so I have had the privilege of having many conversations with teachers and districts across the state of Indiana primarily around what do we need to do to support our students, to support our teachers, to rethink some of the systems that we had in place that aren't working and that currently are not working, and to really transform education to provide an authentically equitable system for students. I've also really had the privilege of talking to a lot of teachers and leaders who are overwhelmed, burnt out, and not just because of the current COVID situation. You know, they were feeling an overwhelm and a burnout before this because of all of the spinning plates and all of the new initiatives and all of the bright, shiny new ideas that were constantly changing year after year after year. And so I'm really excited for the launch of Arrows because I think it is that voice in this landscape that can kind of shine a flashlight for people to say it is okay to simplify. Like it is okay to transform your learning environment and your school culture by doing more with less. And I feel like we all want that permission. And so hopefully Arrows is going to be able to be, you know, a leading voice in that for districts.
Awesome. And what about you, Sarah? How are things going in your neck of the woods?
Good morning. My name is Sarah Henry, and I am currently the secondary science administrator for Brownsburg Schools, which is the school that we focus on in Arrows, kind of our transformation over the past 10 years. And I think that especially this year with being with the pandemic and all of those things, it really kind of highlighted that even when things are crazy, when you have great systems in place, things can still move forward and you can still have quality education. And I think that that's really important, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's looking at different populations, that we're providing an equitable curriculum. So I know that we're excited, especially for next year when things open back up and we can have more visitors here in Brownsburg. And hopefully having this book will be that piece of professional development that will help them kind of make it happen. Like any PD, if you just do a one-stop workshop, that's not going to help. And so we have lots of visitors, and oftentimes they still want that something else. And so we're excited to now have that something else to give them so that they can go and at least put pieces of this into place.
So to that point, I'm curious, and Carrie, you could speak to it first. How did you know something special was going on at Brownsburg that needed to be shared for everyone, not just folks in the community, but also around the world?
I think that for our entire school leadership team there, we went through a transformation where we realigned our arrows. We focused what we were all about, which was about professional learning communities and really creating a system for collective teacher efficacy. We did this, I want to say, around 10 or 11 years. Mm-hmm. This whole past year was like a lost year. So it could be year 11, it could be year 10. And I experienced that transformation first as a teacher, and then within a few years became a curriculum administrator for English, like Sarah is for science. And after the very first year of the aligned vision, we saw drastic results in our district. And as a teacher at the time, it was like, okay, this pays off. Awesome. It translates to student learning. And when I switched then to the admin role as a team, we just kept seeing the results get stronger and stronger and stronger year after year. And we started to have, as Sarah mentioned, the phone calls, the visits, whether people were coming to visit our amazing elementary schools, whether they were coming to visit the middle schools or the high school. Very much it was centered around the question, what are you all doing? And why is it working so well? And we would joke as a leadership team about, well, one day when we write the book. And as Sarah said, we would wish there was something tangible that we could give people, like, here it is, it's written down, here you go. And we didn't have that. And so I really think we knew there was something special when we saw the drastic results in a short amount of time. When we would have visitors come and we would take them into classrooms and they would be speechless. They would walk out and they would say, I've never seen that before. I've never seen 10th graders in stations engaged in, peer tutoring and they're not staring at screens. And I think those were our big ahas that something different was happening, because Brownsburg is full of incredibly dedicated teachers and leaders and staff. And so it's very much a culture where you are all about the students and whatever is best for kids trumps at the end of the day. And so it's not always easy to hit the pause button and realize, like, the power of the system that's been created, because it's just an ingrained culture. So, at one point, I popped into Sarah's office and I was like, it's time to do it. Like, I have the idea, because I'm like the crazy idea one. And I said, I think we need to do this. I think it's time to go from the one day when we write this, and we need to get it down on paper because people need this. And so that's kind of my take on it. It was just seeing the hope and the excitement on the faces of other visitors who would come. And it just kind of made us be like, what is different about, and how would we capture it? So that's what we set about doing, capturing the story of how to do and emulate a lot of what we've done.
So to that end, Sarah, what do you notice now, since you're still there? Like, how are things still growing? How have the seeds been planted? And what do you see happening now in the space that you're still in that would be unique to the space that you're in?
I think that, well, a little bit to backtrack on what Carrie was talking about, I think another kind of big epiphany to Indiana even was the assumption that Brownsburg must be a highly affluent school district, because typically when you see schools, in the top 10, they're school districts where most of the parents have gone to college, and the cost of living's higher. And so I think when people started to figure out that that isn't really what sort of socioeconomics that Brownsburg was made up of, it really kind of lit the fire, because it wasn't you couldn't have that as an excuse anymore. Like, oh, well, we're not the school that's most affluent. I think that, still being here, we are always trying to perfect our practice. But the great thing is that when we start every year, there's no new initiatives. We're just trying to get better at teaching our students. We're trying to make sure that we're being equitable. We're just fine tuning our practices, knowing that we have great people here and we can learn from one another. And I think kind of a side effect of the achievement has also been, teacher satisfaction with working here. We always have, 96% or above satisfaction, or would recommend their friends or family to work here, because all of those distractions, those extra plates have been taken away. And so we just keep trucking along and looking at our group of students each year and making sure that we're getting better.
That's amazing. So thinking along those lines, and this question could go to both of you in terms of like major takeaways for schools who may have too many initiatives going on right now. Maybe they aren't the person who's making the decisions, but they're living that existence. What advice do you have for them to be able to get the same results that you got working through this system with the leadership that you had? Like, is there a first step a non-leader could make to start making those kinds of changes if we have teachers watching right now? Carrie, you want to go first? Yeah.
I think I have a first step that I think for a non-leader or the non-superintendent even
Mm-hmm.
is that you have to be willing to be honest about the fact that if you are feeling an overwhelm from the amount of constant change and you are feeling like there is too much miscommunication or there is not clarity around what the focus is, that doesn't have to be a norm in your educational setting. And it can be a cognitive choice that you make as a team to make the switch. And so your first step as a teacher or teacher leader is assuring yourself there's nothing wrong with you for feeling the constant changes overwhelming or confusing or frustrating. It is. And so the next step is then to have the trust in yourself to have those, courageous conversations with whoever is your next leader. And I think it's about finding a way to say, it's not complaining when you voice that there's too much going on or there's a lack of clarity or there isn't a strong enough focus on student achievement or actual instruction in the classroom. You are not complaining as a teacher or teacher leader to voice that. And so you need to feel empowered to have those conversations. And the more you collectively can have those conversations, if you don't have leaders at the top from the start who have that vision, the more your leaders will see this as a grassroots, and they will know we do want things streamlined. Our teachers do want, more clarity on what it is we're focusing on.
And Sarah, what do you think in terms of starting places or things you notice still in that leadership role? Like, what does that look like for you, having been a part of this process and hoping to help others who may just be starting it?
I completely agree with the things that Carrie said. I think one thing that's exciting about the book and kind of the idea behind it is it gives educators the permission to say no to things, the permission to kind of narrow the focus, reduce the initiatives, and just get really good at that one thing. I think that we went from the Flavor of the Month Club in Brownsburg 10, 11 years ago to any new initiative we were doing, and no one really could get good at it, and we weren't really seeing the impacts. But I think just seeing people be able to like have that sense of relief, like, okay, I don't have to teach every standard. I just need to teach the priority standards, and I need to teach them really well. So I think it's nice, and even for the teacher lens, that it really kind of gives them that permission that it's okay, that that's actually what's best for students and for teachers as well.
So after reading the book and working with you both through the process, is there a particular favorite phrase? I mean, there are so many fun phrases that are in arrows that kind of speak to the energy of what's happening in the space. And, whichever ones they choose, listeners, when you read the book, you'll know a little bit more about it. But is there one that speaks to each of you the most out of all of them? Sorry to put you on the spot with that one, but
I think for me, similar to identical is the top one. I think especially when we're thinking of the lens of providing students with equitable education, it doesn't matter if they have Mrs. Smith or Mr. Walsh for 7th grade science, they should be getting the same experience. And so I think that one's really important. And then probably my second one would be the burden of no. Talking to my husband about this in the construction industry, where, sometimes in that leadership role, it ultimately comes down to you to say no to those extra things. Just because they're flashy technology doesn't mean that we have to do them. So those are probably my top two favorites.
Carrie?
And I love those. My current favorite is people, not programs. And as I think about schools that are trying to figure out how do we use, our CARES dollars in the second or third round, how do we transform different systems in our districts? The answer is not a program. It's not an initiative. It's how do you continue to invest in your teachers and attract high quality talent, but how do you create a system that helps those teachers and leaders collaborate? It is all about leveraging the resources you currently have with your people and maybe finding some new roles and supports and coaches that also need to come alongside to support your people who then can support the students who are also your people. And I don't think you prioritize people over programs unless you are willing to lead with the burden of no. Because people do not thrive in a constantly changing, uncertain environment, which is, what we just experienced and are still experiencing with COVID. So for me, it's people, not programs.
Okay, awesome. And for those of you who haven't read Arrows yet, all of that will make a lot more sense once you get into it. There's so many sort of short takeaways while you're reading it, a lot of ahas, things that you will definitely identify with. I know I did as both a teacher and a leader, reading it for the first time when I sat down with the text. So I want to thank you both for taking the time, and we will be sharing lots and lots of stuff over the next week or so about Arrows, and we hope that you will all keep joining us. Thank you so much for your time.